What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. A link will be in the description box below, as usual. Not feeling so hot, but let's get into it. The title of this video is The Funny Thing About American History. The funny thing about me and a friend of mine were talking earlier, and the funny thing about American history is it really doesn't start before white people got to America. And I was laughing. I said, everybody, pretty much everywhere else on the planet, there's a history that starts beyond 500 years ago. But in America, no. So that's what's the interest. That is the interesting and weird part about quote unquote American history. A person to say, yeah, American history means America started when the people got here. But this is the weird thing about American history. We shouldn't have a Columbus Day then. He landed in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that's closer to South America. But that's another weird thing about American history. It's full of lies. Like, and the reason I bring up that it only is the history starts 500 years ago. It's like, there's a history to Australia before white people showed up. There's history in Africa before white people showed up. Asia, Hell, there's a history in Europe beyond 500 years ago, right? History in Central and South America before white people showed up. But in the United States of America, you gotta ask yourself, and it's just Indians and then the white people and then slavery. That doesn't seem fishy to y'all? I mean, and the reason I say that is because there is no archaeological, people could be an archaeologist in Africa and in Asia. But how often do you hear about American archaeology? I mean, do you? I mean, how often do they study the people and the land, and how far back are they going to dig deep to find stuff from 50,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago or 1,000 years ago? You don't find that weird? Because me and my friend were talking, I was like, this is the one thing about America that's hilarious is there's the history that you've been told. There's the history that you start to find out about. And then there's the history that you got to figure out. And the reason there's a history that you got to figure out is because if you figure out things about this region, then all of this ideology is fragile. It's ready to break. People, talk about population, and the population is growing and dying and growing and dying. People forget something about quote unquote America. Ellis Island, that started in like 1892. What does that tell you? People started migrating to this country in droves 1892 up. So when people have this American story, how many people in America's story actually starts from 1892 to 2018? Or when did Ellis Island stop? I want to say 64, 68, something 64, 65, 68, something like that. Or how many people started their American story started in the 1960s. See, this is what's weird about American history. Everybody has a different history in this country because people get lumped in to color classifications, and each color classification has a different history. But we don't talk about that. That's weird to me because as a black man, when I hear my family never owned slaves, you never said when your family came here. You never said if your family benefited off of slavery, directly or indirectly or not either. When people talk about, how can I say this? A Native American. People don't talk about, how is Johnny Depp a Native American? Does he look like a Native American to you? I mean, you can tell he might have Native American blood in him somewhere along the line, but does he look like a Native American to you? See, the Native Americans seem to, over time, got lighter and lighter and whiter and whiter, and everything changed. That's the funny thing about American history. How often can you find what a Native American looks like in 2018? But if I'm black, you know what I look like in 2018. And if somebody's white, you know what they look like in 2018. And if somebody's Asian, you know what they look like in 2018, right? But Native American is like, could be white, could be Indian, could possibly be black. See, that's the weird thing about American history. It's really right in front of your face and confusing at the same time. And everybody doesn't know the history. See, quote unquote, my people weren't allowed to read. So the history that we had to pass down is different from the history that's in the books. Right? And the history that other people who had advantage in this country is different from mine. And their recollection of it is different, right? Now, the one thing that when people have identity politics, I laugh, and me and my homeboy was talking about this. I was like, he's like, I don't like necessarily being called black. We was black, we was colored. I mean, to a degree, we was Indians. And I was laughing, and I said, he said, but white people, because he was talking to some white folks, and they were all white, but they knew they were different, but they knew they were all white. He was talking to an Irishman. We were slaves for 200 years. But nobody talks about that because y'all wasn't slaves like black people were slaves, for one. And for two, you decided to be white to get ahead. Italians decided to be white to get ahead. Also. And that was like 80 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So when L.A.R first hit, those groups weren't considered white. Now, here's the thing. One of the weirdest things about American history is it's encompassing. Like, as a black man, white people swear they know black people. But everybody knows white people better than they know everybody else. And how do I know this? Because y'all try to teach us y'all American and European history. We know when y'all bullshit. We know when y'all lying. We know when y'all trying to get over. and we know how this stuff ends. Now, when we know you're going to constantly move the goalposts out of fear, that's your history. And that's what I was telling my homeboy. I said, that's the weird thing about America. There is no distinction. There's a distinction in America when you're not white, but there's no distinction when you are white, to the point where it looks like white people can't even tell who's white or not. Because you shouldn't have this, but they're Jewish. You can't tell, though. You can't tell. If of all the country in Europe, how often do that person's Russian, that person's Polish? Like if you get them all in the building, you matching up last names. You're not matching up features. And the last names are interchangeable because people just change their name in opportunism in America. There are Russians with British last names and Jewish people with, quote unquote Jewish people with what you would say English or French last names or Russian last name. You never know. People have a name, a surname, and a name prior to the name, and nobody speaks their own language, quote unquote. See, this is the land to lose your culture, and that's the one thing I started thinking about. I said that's the other weird thing about American history. It's supposed to be a melting pot, but everybody from every place else comes here and loses their culture. See, so Columbus in the Spanish, that is not American history. I mean, that is not quote unquote Spanish history. That's American history, right? The history of the Louisiana Purchase, that's not French history. That's American history, right? The Revolutionary War, that's American history. It's not British history, right? Depends on who you're talking to. You get what I'm saying? So, like, to me, American history is weird because, and I said this before, it's based on a bunch of lies. It's like the people who read the Bible and say, this doesn't make sense. That's what you think. That's what I think about American history half of the time. It doesn't make sense. People who are atheists, I don't believe in God because I haven't seen proof. When you're in America, you're told the same way people haven't seen proof of things. It's things we haven't seen proof of. Because when you talk about American history and you go, this is what it is, and then when you're in school they say this is what it is, and then 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, well, that's not really what it is. So what is it then? American history is weird, man. I'm out.